everybody. Welcome to the latest episode of the Female Film Critics panel. And it's very fun today. We not only have a local Utah critic with us, but we have the newest female film critic, part of the Utah Film Critics Association. And it is Rebecca Frost, podcaster and critic. And Rebecca, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, and especially too on this International Women's Day.
Yeah, yes, we're recording this on March 8th, and so yes, happy International Women's Day. It's very fun.
It's a good day to be a woman and love movies.
That's right. Yeah, so I was so excited when I saw your name come up for approval in the group, because we have previously there were four of us female film critics. That's part of the UFCA, and we've had all four on this panel at various different times, and I really enjoyed interacting with all four. But we can always use more. So thank you so much for coming on and joining the association. And since this is your first time on the podcast, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about what you do, your various podcasts, your various things you do.
Yeah, so I've been podcasting for a little bit over a decade now. I started with the Hello Sweetie podcast and then did Big Shiny Robot podcast. And I kind of jump around from podcast to podcast. But right now, my big home is Geek Show podcast. And that's where I'm found weekly. I was working on my own movie channel, but I had to put a pause on it. So I'm hoping to revisit it later this year. But yeah, mostly in the podcast ether is where you can find me, or just like endlessly posting on Twitter, because I'm going down with that ship,
Yeah, same. Well, I'll have to make sure I'm following you on Twitter then, because I refuse to call it X. That will not happen.
Oh my God, no. Yeah, it is Twitter. It's always the Delta Center, and it's always Twitter.
Right. Well, so did you grow up with a sort of a love of movies? How did that grow?
Yeah, so I definitely grew up like in the geek pop culture zeitgeist. My dad is actually a TV critic, and he's been a critic for most of my life. Bill Frost, not to name drop. But so
which channel does he work for?
So he used to be the TV critic for City Weekly, but right now he does the TV reviews on X96 on Monday mornings. And I think right now he's just on like cabletv.com or something like that. But I learned a lot about like criticism and, stuff like that from him, because I just grew up in it. But I also grew up like always watching TV, always watching movies. And I always have kind of gravitated in the direction of movies over TV. Like I've done acting, and I've one of my big favorite things to do is like improv and sketch comedy. And I've worked on a couple short films. I still to this day will review and help punch up scripts. So I am familiar with like the film territory, but I feel like film criticism and evaluation, I really I've found that I have a voice there, and I think it's really good. So, I wanted to lean more in that direction. And so I kind of, I had a big push for it earlier, like a couple of years ago. And then, recently I've just kind of navigated more towards, I'm just doing this for fun for myself. And I think that's also what makes it better, because there's, no pressure to like try to please everybody, and really, this is just for me. This is my air quotes hobby. This is what I like to do, and I think I'm really good at it. So that's kind of where I'm at right now.
You're not like trying to make a brand like for me. It's really hard. You're smart.
Well, and last year, I was trying to do that. I started my YouTube channel, The Critics Darling, and I made like a whole Oscars video last year, and I started doing film reviews on that channel, and then my life kind of imploded. And so I kind of had to put it on hold, and it took like all of the motivation out of me to keep working on it. So that's why I'm like, hopefully,
least, I don't know about with YouTube, but at least with podcasts, that most podcasts don't last more than 6 episodes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And like,
So
podcasting, it's so, yeah,
there are a lot of,
it's
because
hard.
people think, oh, you're just talking to a microphone. It's easy, no problem. They don't understand the amount of work that goes into scheduling the guest,
Mm-hmm.
or or co-host, watching whatever program you're going to be watching, taking notes, coming up with questions if it's an interview. Um, and then once you actually execute said program, then you have to edit,
Mm-hmm.
which is labor intensive, and create graphics, promotion, things
Yeah,
like
there's so much,
ridiculous.
there's a lot of thankless work that
Yeah,
goes
there
into it.
really
And
is.
I think people don't realize that. Like, I can't tell you the number of times I've had people who are like, "Oh, can I be on your podcast?" I'm like, "Why? Like,
Yeah,
what can you bring to, like, I don't want to sound like a dick, but like
yeah, yeah,
what can you bring to make it an entertaining show?"
yeah.
And, it's,
Well, and
really
there are
filters out
times
people
when
that way.
everything on paper seemed like a great fit, and then it just doesn't, it just doesn't
Yeah.
pan
Well,
out. It's just
it's hard
not
too
like
when like
I like to pride myself that I can pull a good interview out of almost anybody.
mhm.
I've come pretty darn close that it's like listenable. I feel like I can make almost anything listenable, but nevertheless, some are more work than others. There was one time with Hallmarkies podcast, this actor who is a secondary actor, and sometimes those are like the best interviews of all, like even more than the
Mhm.
stars. And we had him on, and he was really nervous, and like, God bless him for even being willing to do it. I give him huge credit. But he was really nervous, and he was very like, every time I tried to ask him about something, he was very like self-facing about it, very kind of almost
Mhm.
embarrassed about, like, oh, it was just a small role, I don't want to talk about it. And so I was like, okay. And because some people, you just start them and they're like, this was I got to meet this person, and this was the
Mhm.
craft service, like whatever, they'll just talk anyway. And so I was like, this is really, because it wasn't, I was feeling like this is going to embarrass him. That was my more
Mm.
concern than whether it was going to be a great interview. So I'm like, what am I going to do? And this was back when Joker was nominated or whatever. And so
Mhm.
I was like, so have you seen any of the Oscar nominees for Hallmarkies, whatever? And he was like, yeah, I've seen a couple. And he's like, what did you think of Joker? And then and then we ended up having maybe a 5-minute discussion about Joker.
Mhm.
And it's what he needed to like kind of get him to be a little bit. And there were probably people who were like, you were so off topic, you weren't even talking about Hallmark movies. I didn't even care.
This is a
I
movie podcast. Like, it's my show. I'm allowed to talk about whatever I want.
Yeah, that absolutely, but also like it saved the interview, so
Yeah. Well, and
I don't
like
really care.
it's hard because like to be a podcast host, like you do have to know how to interview people
Yeah.
and like be really sociable because not everybody's going to immediately come out of their shell,
Hmm.
right? Like there is definitely a skill to it that
Yeah.
not everybody has, and like that's okay, but
Yeah.
like people don't, I think sometimes people don't understand just how much work does go into
Yeah.
not only creating a podcast but like running a podcast and making a
Yeah.
good show.
Yeah, people have I've heard so many people say, "Oh, I wish I could get paid just to sit in front of a camera," and
And you're like, yeah, me too, right?
yeah. But but it's interesting. I mean, talk about the total opposite of me, you growing up with a father who's a critic, because my parents were just have almost no interest in media, like
Mm.
none. Like they don't,
Mhm.
very, very, very little. My mom likes to read, but I've never met anybody who has less like interest in media than my parents. Like most people have like the one show that they love,
Uh-huh.
or like a band that they love, or something like that, that they're super
Mhm.
into. Not my parents. And so I was always sort of this weird anomaly who loved movies, and I was always more sort of, my dad's pretty outgoing, and but I was just kind of more extroverted than the rest of my siblings and
Mhm.
my mom. And she's an artist, and she's just more introverted. than I am. And so it's just been an interesting experience to kind of come to my own as an adult and
Mhm.
kind of realize what I like and why I like it and why I'm so passionate about it, and to kind of find my movie loving and also like critical analysis loving hive that surrounds me.
Mhm.
Even something like a Hallmark movie that you can talk about it, and that
Yeah.
I find friends who want to talk about these things. Because it's not something I really grew up with.
Yeah, I've always been really lucky that like I grew up surrounded by like geek culture and
Mm-hmm.
like media. So
Yeah.
it's never been like unusual to me. But in like that same vein, I don't know how to interact with people who aren't, right? So like there was one time I used to work at this job where we'd have all of our customers in our system, and I was looking up this one guy by his name, and his last name was Renner. And I said, "Oh, like Jeremy Renner." And he's like, "Who is that?" And I'm like, "Oh, he's an actor. Have you seen and I think this was like right around when the first Avengers movie had come out. And so I was like, have you seen the Avengers?" And he's like, "Oh, no." And then I think I listed off some other movie that he was
Only
in,
that little indie, the
this little tiny
Avengers.
indie movie. And I listed off some other movie, and he was like, "No." And then I was like, "Okay, maybe this guy's an indie guy." And I'm like, "Okay, have you seen The Hurt Locker?" And he's like, "I have no idea what that is." And I'm like, "Okay, this is fine. It's fine. We can't get along. It's fine."
That's
Are you a fan of Rachel's reviews? Do you look forward to Family Movie Night, Female Film Critics panels, or the Talking Disney podcast? If so, please consider supporting the podcast by becoming a Patreon. As a patron, you get to access monthly events such as the watch-alongs and Q&As, where you get to talk to stars and find out the behind the scenes of the movie making industry. And you can pick what I review for Family Movie Night or even become a guest on the podcast. Podcasts and YouTube channels are expensive, and I really, really could use your help. I would so appreciate it. You also get to be a member of the Facebook group where we talk about all the films that we're seeing, and we have so much fun. Go to patreon.com/hallmarkies and select one of the Rachel's fan tiers. That's patreon.com/hallmarkies.
day because sometimes I substitute teach just to supplement everything.
Mhm.
And I was at the school, and one of the other aides, I said, "Oh, my main thing is I do the Hallmarkies podcast," and she was like, "What?" And I was like, "Hallmarkies, like Hallmark movies," and we I podcast about them. And she's like, "What's a podcast?"
Oh
And
no.
I was just like she literally had no idea. Like, I get some people just don't like to listen to podcasts. That's fine. But like, it kind of threw
But
me
not
that she
knowing
had
what it
never
is.
heard of a podcast before.
Ah. You're like, it's a radio show that you can just kind of listen to whenever.
Yeah.
It's fine.
I'm like, it's kind of like an audiobook, but that's how
Oh my God. I don't the only time I've encountered somebody saying what's a podcast is my grandmother. And she was like, "What time can I listen to it?" And I had to be like, anytime,
And this
anytime you
lady
want.
was, I mean, I feel like she was around my age. It was just
Oh
really funny.
no. Whoa. How
Yeah.
fun to meet someone in the
Yeah.
wild who still doesn't know what a podcast is.
But one thing I noticed in looking over your website, your material, is that you have a wide range of interests. Like
Yeah.
yeah, I was like, what fandom doesn't she cover? I was amazed because you had stuff
Yeah.
on Star Trek, on Star Wars, on
Mhm.
Doctor Who, on
Mhm.
Avenger, Marvel. I was kind of amazed by that.
Yeah, my current fascination is Star Trek. But
Hmm.
that is the thing. I When it comes to like not only fandom but like movies and music too, I'm in this music league with a bunch of friends, and I nobody has been able to guess my picks yet because I have such a varied interest. The thing is I like most everything.
Hmm.
Um I rarely come across something where I'm like, want to die. But yeah, I try to find joy in like everything, right? Because things
Hmm.
aren't made without passion, right? And so like there's something to find to enjoy in everything. And it's just, knowing what to look for, and I think having an open
Yeah.
mind too is huge.
I certainly save that kind of lazy this feels like nobody's trying argument. I use that extremely sparingly when I really feel like, oh my gosh, where's the effort here? Like,
Yeah.
because I mean, I think like anybody else, like Hollywood movie makers can can basically sit one out. Like, I don't think anybody's like immune from doing the bare minimum, but I like to try to give people the benefit of the doubt that they're at least trying. But man, this Madam Web.
I was going to say the only thing that comes to mind where I'm like, I don't know if any effort was made is Madam Web.
I mean,
which
just
is
when you have
so
things that's
funny.
so sloppy, like the ADR, and just the performance, it just felt like nobody cared about this. And I'm sure that if I talked to them, they would be like, no, we really did try, but it just didn't come through. It didn't come through.
Yeah. And like, that's the thing too, like hundreds of people work on these movies, right? And so like, I have a hard time believing that hundreds of people don't care about a project that they're working on. But I do have a big belief in corporations getting their grubby little fingers on things and ruining it. And I mean, definitely think like that's what happened with Madam Web, but like, good God. I also think Dakota Johnson has the personality of a dry sponge. So like, I don't know if she like ever puts in effort to anything, you know?
Yeah, I feel like I've seen her in some indies and stuff that she was. Yeah, I liked her in the Peanut Butter Falcon. She was good in that. Or
I haven't seen Cha Cha Real Smooth. I heard that she's really good in that, and The Lost Daughter. I haven't seen those two, but I've heard that she's pretty good.
Certainly better than than that. And I mean, when the Pepsi sign takes out our villain, you're just like, I can't believe what I'm seeing. Like, unbelievable.
And just also like,
it was
no sense of urgency, nary a sense of urgency from any of the characters in this movie. Ben Parker, an EMT, has no idea what to do when his sister-in-law goes into labor. I'm sorry, I don't buy it.
And the whole movie was just basically her moving people around. Somebody quoted that it was a thriller. I'm like, what are you talking about?
What was thrilling about it?
Yeah, it was literally like people moving from one area to another area. Like, there was no thriller. There was nothing thrilling about it. I mean,
I will say, so like the thing about Madam Web is I had fun, but I also knew going in that it was a bad movie. And this is also part of the reason why like I so insist on going to like public screenings, or like I call them normie screenings, because the audience makes such a huge difference, right? Like we used to be so excited to go see Marvel movies, right? Because the crowd, I love a rowdy crowd. But you know, seeing Madam Web with a crowd who knows what it is and what they're there for makes such a huge difference than people who are like expecting a good movie. Like when I went to see Drive, I probably need to revisit Drive because I didn't like it the first time I saw it. But nobody else in my theater liked it either. One guy started smoking a cigarette in the theater. That's how bored he was.
Although that feels kind of on the vibe of Drive.
Yeah. It was like, you
that
know
feels
what?
kind of like that feels like something those characters would
add
do.
to the ambiance.
Yeah, I think so. That's crazy. Wow. Yeah, I don't know. I see the pluses and minuses because I think going to the screenings early, it can give you a kind of objectivity. Not that a critic can ever be 100% objective, but I like to at least make a feigning effort at objectivity. And I think that going early, it can help you with that because you're not as influenced by other reviews or by the, in a way, I kind of like not being influenced by the audience, but it does lose sort of that some of that fun that can have. I don't know, with what Madam Web, I really didn't even. I mean, I was laughing to myself because I didn't want to be rude to everybody else, but I was laughing, especially the poor woman who's just stuck there in like permanently in the villain's apartment. Like, evidently she can't leave.
Yeah,
she's just there all the time. Like, what is this?
There's
it was painful, but yeah, I can see the pluses and minuses. I do think that it's always an interesting thing to kind of see something and then kind of wait and see what the response will be. I mean, and that's sort of the festival experience as well. I'm just about to go to South by Southwest, and you know, I'll see things and have my reaction, and then it might take a year. There's still stuff that hasn't come out that I saw last year at South by Southwest. And so it sometimes takes a while, and then you see what people think of it. And it's always very interesting. And I think I kind of value that that reaction and that,
Mhm.
I don't know, that rawness of my reaction, I probably more, but I can see why it sort of makes it a little bit more academic and less fun.
Yeah, the one a fun I don't know if I want to call this a fun experience, but there's an experience that I think about a lot where I went to go see Skinamarink because everybody I'm chronically online, right? Especially on film Twitter. And so everybody
Yeah.
was like, Skinamarink rules. Can't wait to see Skinamarink in a theater. And I'm like, I can vibe. Went to go see Skinamarink. Worst hour of my life, right? Just an absolutely miserable movie. But what I Skinamarink is so fun because it is a very divisive movie. You either absolutely
Yeah.
hate it or it's the scariest movie you've ever seen. And I absolutely hated it. And my theater was packed. I was in a sold out theater because I went to go see it opening weekend. And we're all there for the same thing, right? We're all there for a good word of mouth horror movie. Movie ends and we're all pissed, right? Like one guy starts clapping and whoever was next to him was like, stop it, because we were all so furious. And like that experience
Yeah.
sticks with me because it was so fun. But then
Well,
also like I
you'll
saw a lot of Sundance movies too, and
yeah.
so like the movie
Sundance.
that most people have been asking me about is Sasquatch Sunset, and people are like, "Oh, did you see Sasquatch Sunset?" And I'll send them my Letterboxd review where I gave it like 3.5 stars, and I said, "I wish I could bring Elvis to the future to see his legacy." (Parentheses Riley Keough pissing and shitting in the middle of a road in a Sasquatch suit. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, I
I
definitely
like
passed
having
on
that
that one, that's for
advantage.
sure. But
Oh, it's yeah.
yeah, it's interesting because after a while, the other critics, and I don't know if you plan on going to any increasing your screening viewage at all,
I
but
will, don't worry.
yeah, but the other critics start to kind of know you just a little bit. Like we become friends, I feel like,
Mhm.
and they kind of know my taste, that I'm a bit of a horror wimp, and that I'm that I watch a lot of romances and rom-coms, and I love animation and Christmas movies, things like that. And anyway, sometimes they'll just be kind of looking over like, oh no, Rachel's in agony at this. And the one that I especially remember was Alex Garland's Men, which
God,
it was
he's on
so
thin
bad.
ice. Alex Garland is on thin ice
Yes.
after Men, you know?
And Civil War looks absolutely terrible. I might see it coming up at South by Southwest, but it looks absolutely terrible to me. So yeah, he's lost it for me. But Men and a bunch of rich particularly are looking at me like, oh no, Rachel's hating this.
The last press screening I went to was last year. I went to go see Beau is Afraid because my
Uh-huh.
favorite movie is Midsommar. I love Ari Aster. I love Joaquin Phoenix. I had been looking forward to Beau is Afraid for so long, knowing that everybody hated it. And so I went to that press screening. I sat far away by myself because I didn't want to be surrounded by everyone who was going to hate it. Movie ends. It takes every fiber of my being not to like stand up and clap because I loved it. I had a blast. I know everybody else hates it, but like it took everything in me not to be like, woo, movie of the year, because I knew I would get like the ire from everybody else.
Well, it is funny when you have like a very different reaction. Actually, just I can't say it because it's still under embargo, but there was, oh, I mean, I guess this will come out after, but I had I went to the screening of Arthur the King.
Oh, the dog movie.
Yeah, the dog movie. And I absolutely loved it. I thought it was
really?
so good. I thought it did such a good job at being what it was trying to be. And I can totally see that if you don't like somewhat emotional manipulative movies, then you might not like it. But what happens with the dog? I was just like, oh, I was so relieved and I was so happy. And there's a scene on a zip line that had my
with the
jaw.
dog.
Did you used to go to the screen?
No,
no, the dog's not in that scene. But
oof.
Yeah, there's a scene on a zip line that I couldn't believe. It was really intense and very well done. Oof. And I just loved it. I thought it was so good. And I'm walking out of the theater and I was Rich was taking down the notes, and I was just like, that was so good. I'm so happy about the dog and everything, and the zip line scene. And he was kind of like, oh, okay, and I was like, what, you didn't like it? And he was like, no, I hated it. I was like, what? I couldn't believe he didn't like it. And yeah, he hated it. So it's just always a really funny experience when that happens.
It takes a lot for me to not like something. I typically really like most things that I see. I think of the current like upcoming Oscar noms, right? The one movie that I saw, I mean, Maestro is kind of like a bleh, whatever.
Yeah.
But Past Lives, I'm the outlier, and like I did not like Past Lives at all.
Like Past Lives, huh?
Not because it wasn't a well-made movie. I thought it was a great movie. It just brought up feelings in me that I didn't like, and I kind of disagree with everybody on their opinions about the movie, about how they're like, it's so romantic that he's loved her for 24 years and he came all the way from Korea to see her. And I'm like, that's creepy. If someone did that to me, I would hate that.
Yeah.
And I think it's all like perspective, right?
I don't think it's creepy, but the movie did give me like severe anxiety because I think it was well done. But I watched it at Sundance, and I'm sitting there, and I thought her husband was so great. I loved that actor's performance. I thought he was so endearing and so unconditional love. And I was just like, please don't cheat on your husband. Please don't cheat on your... And I like seriously sitting there. So it was a thriller for me, and I was just like, no. And she doesn't. So it was all okay. But I was just, it was not romantic, but I do think it's more to me about like the other path that you could have taken, that she could have taken, And so I think it's interesting on that level. But yeah, I that's funny. But
yeah, it's like I said, I am the only person I know who is like, I didn't like what he did and I thought it was weird, and if I was in her position, I'd be pissed. But that's just me.
Welcome to the Pilot Podcast. My name is BJ.
And my name is Me Too, and we promise this promo is worth it, so please don't skip ahead.
We're two judgy friends who put our judgmental skills to work for you. We review the pilot episodes of new and popular shows, and shows that our listeners request to answer your question, should I watch this?
Look, a lot of us are spending a lot more time at home, and yes, we should be reading and trying new projects and enriching ourselves, but does anything beat binging a great show?
Let us take the guesswork out of deciding what your next show will be. Tune in to The Pilot Podcast at thepilotpodcast.com.
For me, Maestro was my least favorite of, it's the one I didn't recommend. The others I gave at least a mild recommendation to, or a passing kind of.
Yeah, Maestro, I watched because I make a point to watch every single Oscar nominated thing. And that one I was just like, oh, I have to eat my vegetables. And so like,
I mean, Maestro just to me felt extremely phony from everything. Like people are like, oh, the performances were so good. I'm like, no, they weren't.
Like no, Bradley Cooper's pretending, and he's not acting, he's pretending. Yeah. And he's just trying to get an Oscar.
Yeah, it didn't feel like a real human being. Like, yeah, I know Leonard Bernstein was eccentric in real life, but like, yeah, that's fine. The party scenes or in crowds, like absolutely. But when he's just like talking to his kids, like, let's have an authentic moment. Everything just felt so phony to me, and I thought that she felt phony too. It was not.
Poor Carey Mulligan. I like Carey Mulligan in that she kind of seems to just take roles, right? I'm like, girl, this is not your year for an Oscar. You should sit down.
No, I did actually enjoy Promising Young Woman. I know it was divisive, but I liked that, and I love Far From the Maddening Crowd. Very underrated. If you haven't seen that,
I haven't. I really liked Promising Young Woman, but I will have to see a third film from Emerald Fennell before I make a judgment call on her, because like the way Promising Young Woman ends, like, it makes sense. I don't know that I'm a fan of it. The way Saltburn ends, okay. But also just like Saltburn felt so hollow. And
I skipped Saltburn. That was my one pass this year.
learning that Emerald Fennell's a Nepo baby, and like she went to whatever fancy school. I think she went to Oxford. Like just learning that about her, it left a weird taste in my mouth. And I'm
Yeah.
like, girl, I don't know if I'm gonna need to see a third movie before I make like an official call. But like,
Yeah, I
yeah.
can see that. Well, it looked like on your content that you're a pretty big Disney slash Star Wars person.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Disney is in like a pretty big mess right now. I mean,
Mhm.
they just had one flop after another last year. The parks are kind of a mess in my opinion. They're so overpriced, and
Mhm.
the service isn't what it used to be, and everything's getting nickel and dimed.
Mhm.
And last year I went to I went to Universal Studios Hollywood for the first time, and I had an amazing experience. And I
Yeah.
just thought, I don't know, like, what is the reason to go to Disneyland at this point? And I'm like a Disneyland person.
Mhm.
It was such a good time. And so I don't know, it's a big problem, and I don't know what they're going to do, but I'm just curious from your perspective, what do you think they should do to dig themselves out of this mess?
The underlying thing for me with a lot of businesses, just stop being so greedy, right?
Mhm.
I went to Disneyland December 2019, right before the pandemic. I had a blast, but I also hadn't been to Disneyland since I was a child. But also at the same time, I think especially when it comes to Marvel too, right? Like they were doing great 2019 Endgame, like chef's kiss,
Yeah.
cherry on top, like cool. You're gonna have a hard time navigating your way forward from here anyway. Pandemic hits, and then 2021 comes, and they put such a huge emphasis on getting as much content out as possible, and they set the bar too high for themselves, I think, because now you have all these fans asking, "Where's Moon Knight season 2?" You're never gonna get a Moon Knight season 2, right?
I watched WandaVision and I watched Loki season 1, and I haven't watched anything else. Hawkeye. I watched those 3 shows. That's it. I just don't have time to watch all these
Mhm.
shows. And for the most part, like, I had been able to keep up with the movies, but then I go see the Marvels, and I felt like I was like, I guess I didn't do my homework because I have no idea what's happening. And
Mhm.
and that movie was just such a hatchet job, in my opinion. I thought it was really bad, and I was so disappointed in it. And it's like they think that they can just release anything, and
Mhm.
people will see it. And I think that with the Marvels, they finally realized, hopefully, how could they not realize that no, that's not true. Like, you have to put out something that's compelling with a good story,
Mhm.
good characters.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for it's I think Disney's going to have a hard time correcting, because I also am such a big believer in like original stories and original content. So like when they announced Moana 2, I was like, "Oh, really?"
From a
Of all
TV
the
show
of all the
too.
well, I so it was supposed to be a TV show, and
Yeah.
they're like, "Oh, I don't know that this works as a TV show, so we're just gonna make it a movie instead." There's some
And
huge implications with that,
yeah,
right?
and they didn't even have they don't have Lin-Manuel Miranda on board, and they didn't even have The Rock or for this
No.
Moana 2 on board. And yeah, I mean, not only that with Moana 2, but Frozen 3 and 4, they have
Mhm.
they announced a new Ray movie for Star Wars. It's like, who wants
We don't
that? And I
listen,
just feel like
big fan of women over here. Love female-led movies. I don't wanna see a Rey movie. I wanna see that
nobody
Rogue
does.
Squadron movie that we were supposed to get from Patty Jenkins. And,
Yeah.
like,
No.
it sucks because, like,
They just don't get it.
Disney's
I'm
doing
like,
this
how can you
thing.
be this clueless?
Yeah, like, Disney's doing this thing where, it's like the J.J. Abrams effect, right? Like, Rise of Skywalker came out, and he did this thing where he tried to appease everybody, right?
Yeah.
And make the most money by appeasing everybody, which not a good movie makes. And I think that's such a good example of what Disney does overall. Like, oh, people liked Frozen. Here's more Frozen movies, right?
Mhm.
But then you get a show like Andor, like big Star Wars fan over here. But I really struggle with Star Wars because I'm not a huge fantasy fan. And Star Wars is really just like space fantasy.
Right.
But then you get a show like Andor that comes out, which is more gritty on the ground, like political thriller. And I'm like, oh, more of this, please. But like,
I didn't see it just because I don't have time to watch television, but I heard it was good. I heard that from pretty much everybody.
Highly recommend. It's so incredible. Like, it ruined Star Wars for me. I can't go back and watch other Star Wars besides Last Jedi. Because again, Last Jedi did the thing where it challenged everybody's existing notions of Star Wars and what Star Wars can be. And sorry, my cats are like having a battle.
Like, for me, Last Jedi, it subverted expectations, but then it didn't replace those expectations with something satisfying. And so it was a frustrating experience for me. But the whole thing was just a mess. And they should have just had, like, even if it would have been more bland, it would have been better to just have JJ just do all three. So at least it would have been consistent. And it's just a mess. But they have Toy Story 5 coming out. Like, I defend Toy Story 4, but after Lightyear, come on.
You know?
What? Toy Story 5 coming out. They have the Lion King, quote unquote, live action prequel coming out.
But like, that's enough. Like, that's enough. Bad. Please invest in some original stuff. But then also, when they do, like Elemental, didn't really care for Elemental, right?
No, but that wasn't really original. Like, it was so derivative of so many things that we've seen before. So it's like original light to me.
Yeah.
I mean, it was so derivative of Inside Out and Monsters Inc. and Zootopia.
It was so mismarketed too, because like, I would have loved if I had known it was a story about a first generation immigrant, that I would have been way more interested in that than like whatever love story they were trying to pitch.
And like, technically Wish is original, but it was like not.
I didn't even see Wish, right?
Bad.
Like,
it was bad.
Yeah.
It was bad. So yeah, it's a mess.
We'd like to take a second and thank our sponsor for this episode of the podcast. It's the Hallmarkies merch store.
Are you looking for that perfect gift for the postable, Hardy, or Hallmarky in your life?
What about getting that t-shirt or hoodie that will help you stand out at your next holiday party?
Now is the time to check out the Hallmarkies merch store.
Full of festive designs by artists like Jessica Miller, Carrie from Hallmark Comics, and more.
You can even have more than just shirts, but totes, cell phone cases, notebooks, mugs, and more.
And it isn't just Hallmark. We have designs for Anna Green Gables, Man from Snowy River, The Nanny, and more.
Every purchase at the merch store goes to help support the podcast and allows us to make the great content you know and love.
There are frequent sales, so go to tpublic.com/stores/Hallmarkies or see the link in the description.
That's tpublic.com/stores/Hallmarkies.
I think that I would try to I don't know. It's interesting because Disney has this kind of cycle that every like 15 years or so they go through this, and then they need a renaissance, and then and so it's interesting how this, so it's like kind of waiting for the next The Little Mermaid or Cinderella or and that's probably what I would suggest is to do an old-fashioned fairy tale with good songs, good animation. That's probably where I would say, do that. And it's not always a guarantee because they kind of tried to do that with Princess and the Frog. But
totally, right? Like the last true animation.
But the problem with that one is that they weren't confident enough in their story. And so they made lots of changes because of focus groups and stuff like that. And so the whole thing ends up feeling like really muddled. And it's also just like misguided. Like, why do the Black characters in Disney movies always turn into animals? Like, that's weird.
Yeah.
Even in Soul.
I think the biggest thing for me is like WB right now is such a good example of like, just let your artists make
Yeah.
things, and don't focus so much on your bottom line.
Authentic
who's
storytelling.
who's a great leader in this area? A24. Maybe follow the A24 model, where like they give creators a bunch of money to make their movie, and they turn out amazing product because they have faith in their creators.
Or at least like 50%. I'm not willing to say
A24 biased.
At least you have a fighting chance. Let's put it that way.
I'm extremely biased towards A24. I love anything that A24 puts out. I will admit it.
Men.
I know. Yeah, I know. They're not all perfect.
I would say I'm about 50-50 with A24, sure. But I'd rather take that game of roulette than what Disney has been putting out lately.
It's so corporatized, and everyone's so focused on the bottom line, and I'm like, you guys just aren't, you don't get it.
The best movie that they had last year was a little movie that they had on Disney Channel called Prom Pact. That was a charming, well-made, well-acted
teenage that one have
rom-com.
The AI crowd?
The what crowd?
The AI generated crowd.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it was during the pandemic. You couldn't have crowd scenes. I was fine with that, but but the leads were really good, and the writing was sharp, and it was really, I thought, well done. It was the best thing they made last year, in my opinion.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
I have to give it a watch.
So in fact, all of the Disney Channel movies last year were pretty good. And so I was telling my friend, I'm like, they need to give that person a raise. I need to talk to that person because they don't make any of those. They're selecting them. And I'm like, that person has a good eye. These are all solid.
Interesting.
That they did. And so I'm like, talk to them. They know what they're doing. But anyway, it is interesting to see what will happen. So I noticed that you had a whole little series that you did where you were talking a little smack about Stephen Moffat over Doctor Who.
Yeah, not a huge Stephen Moffat fan.
I am the same. I especially his Sherlock. Oh man, I hated that so much. I liked the first series. Second series was pretty good. Third was not good. Fourth,
get out here, Stephen Moffat.
Oh my gosh.
They just let him have ideas, right?
So much. I'm like, how is everybody in this series 4 smarter than Sherlock? And you make Watson a cheater? It was
right. You can be subversive, but be good at it,
Yeah, that's the problem. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think he's
so when they announced that Russell T Davies was coming back to Doctor Who, I was like, ruh-roh. As long as we make sure Stephen Moffat's not allowed in the room.
I think that I say that Stephen Moffat is the Shyamalan of television.
Oh,
because he's so fixated on twisting twisteroos,
making it weird,
that he
right?
forgets to actually tell a good story.
Yeah, that's a really good example. I like Shyamalan, but when I saw Old, right?
Oh my gosh.
I read the comic that it's based on, and the comic's really good, right? I think it's a really good comic. But then having seen the movie, it's so painfully obvious where Shyamalan was like, okay, but then what if we did this too? And I'm like, oh, please just blend it a little bit better,
Yeah, definitely. Well, we have some fun get to know you questions to end the interview off with. Okay. Cool. First one, what is the best ice cream flavor?
I'm such a bland person. I like vanilla. I like the basic flavors of most things, like vanilla ice cream, cornflakes, right? I like just basic flavors because you can add whatever you want to it,
Yeah, no, I defend that. In fact, it's kind of a thing in Hallmark movies sometimes, is that they'll have the heroine, supposedly she's not embracing her true self or whatever, because she orders like vanilla cake or vanilla ice cream or whatever. And then like the guy's like, no, don't but just be satisfied for that. Like try something new. And then she's like, oh, this is amazing or whatever. And I'm always like, no, it is
like,
perfectly
listen,
valid.
I'll try. I will try anything, right? I love being culinarily adventurous.
Yeah.
But if I'm making something for me, it's gonna be vanilla.
I'm like, she can have whatever kind of cake she wants to have.
That's the
Don't
best part
stop
of
telling her
feminism.
that she needs to change. Like, yeah. All right. What's your favorite color?
Blue or green? Blue or green? I've recently been, I don't know if it's like Barbie influence, but I've been leaning into pinks a lot recently.
Okay, good. All right. What music are you into?
Ooh, like I said earlier, I have such a broad spectrum of music tastes. Right now, I've recently been Orville Peck pilled, so listening to like a lot of Orville Peck and Casey Musgraves.
Okay.
But I like a lot of stuff. I'm like musicals to metal to country to hip hop, rap, like R&B. I don't know. I like music,
Yeah. All right. What is your go-to date night food?
My go-to date night food. Usually, if my husband and I are like trying to figure out what to do for dinner, I think, again, because I just love everything. So I'll pitch like sushi or Thai food first, or there's this one place that we like to order from that does what I like to call a box of tacos, where they give you like 18 tacos in a pizza box.
And, maybe I have to try this place.
Yeah, but stuff that we can share, I think, is usually my favorite like date night food.
My current obsession, there's this place, there's two of them. I think it's Saratoga Springs, but the one I go to is an American Fork. And it's called the Smoked Taco.
Okay.
You got to try it.
Okay.
So good. So good. Particularly my favorite, the one called the OG, which is a pork taco. And then there's one, I forget the name, but it's a corn taco. So it's like a vegetarian one.
Nice.
So good.
Yeah. I love trying new places too.
And I'm so excited about, there's this in October, they opened up this theater called the Maven Cinemas.
I've heard about it.
Yeah, you gotta go. You gotta go. I really want them to be successful. So I try to go at least one a week, but it's a revival cinema. And so they have all of these screenings. Like tomorrow, I'm going to see Sleeping Beauty there, which has been a dream of mine to see Sleeping Beauty on the big screen. So I'm so excited. But they're amazing, and you can easily make a dinner combo and go to Smoked Taco, and then just like a couple blocks up. You're gonna make cinemas.
One of my dreams, I don't know that I ever want to run a business, but one of my dreams is to open up like a revival cinema. Like there's one I think it's in Los Angeles called Vidiots, where like they have like a video store, but then they also do like screenings and stuff. That's a dream.
That's what they're doing. It's this couple that was their dream. So it's just a 2-screen theater. And if I was super rich, I would reopen the Villa in Salt Lake.
That guy, he's never selling the Villa. He loves rugs too much. Like it's insane. The man loves his rugs too much. Like he's never going to sell. It's insane.
Why does he like rugs so much?
When I was in utero, my mom went to go see a Star Wars triple feature. So like she's like 9 months pregnant with me watching like A New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi. And I think that's probably where it all began, in the womb, right?
Because that's where I have such memories seeing Fantasia, seeing Beauty and the Beast, seeing Little Mermaid there.
I think the last movie I saw there was Tarzan when it came out.
Oh, sad that he likes rugs so much.
I know. The man, he's like, it's weird. It's crazy. Trust me, I've looked into it.
Well, when he leaves this merry existence, then somebody, please.
We can go in on purchasing the Villa.
Okay, it's a deal.
Making a revival theater.
All right, which do you like better, dogs or cats?
I have 2 dogs and I have 2 cats. You've probably seen me. My one cat, she's the meanest cat you've ever met. She's my 3-legged old lady, and I have this other cat who's younger, and he just wants to play with her, and she's like, "I will end you if you even come near me." And so that's what like they've been doing over here. But then I have 2 dogs who they're just big idiots.
Very good. Okay. Which do you like better, beaches or mountains?
Mountains only to look at, but if I'm participating in the environment, then beaches. Like I don't want to go camping, but I'll be in a mountain, you know?
I can see that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm definitely team beaches, which is ironic because I live in a landlocked state and mountains.
You can still like beaches though.
but the mountains are beautiful. I think you take them for granted sometimes in
for sure.
Utah.
Yeah.
All right. What's your favorite holiday to celebrate?
My favorite holiday to celebrate. You know, it didn't used to be this way, but this is my husband's favorite holiday, and I think it's evolving into to be my favorite holiday, Thanksgiving, because my husband and I, we love hosting a party. And so Thanksgiving, we typically end up hosting like 3 or 4 different Thanksgivingses and Friendsgivingses. But it's so much so much fun because we just love hosting. And probably Thanksgiving is going to be my favorite.
Yeah. Good. All right. Last question. What's your favorite romantic movie?
My favorite romantic movie. Oh God. Let's see. I don't know. The only one that like immediately comes to mind is P.S. I Love You. Because that movie
like a crier.
makes me sob so much. Yeah, I don't know. I'm pulling my mind's going blank. It's the only one I can think of.
Oh, hey, it counts. Very good. You did it. You answered all the questions. Welcome to UFCA. I look forward to hopefully seeing you at some screenings.
Yeah.
And getting to know you better. So thanks for coming on, talking with us.
For having me.
And how do people find you? Sounds like you're big on Twitter and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, on Twitter is where I'm mainly at @YouGrossRebecca. You can also, my website, it's horrend. It's so outdated, but I have many different domains: Podcast Princess, the Rebecca Frost, or my favorite domain, Chris Evans, Please Bone Me. That'll take you to my website. But you can hear me weekly on Geek Show Podcast and also on my Star Trek podcast called The Space Show, which is, if you're listening to it, it's on the Geek Show feed. But if you go to YouTube, it's also it's a playlist on Geek Show's YouTube channel. So you can go there.
And is that original Star Trek or Next Generation?
So the premise of the show is I had never seen any Star Trek. And so we started at the beginning with original series, watched all of the original series, the animated series, watched all of the original series movies. And now currently we're in season 3 of the Next Generation. So we're making our way through all of the Star Trek properties. Yeah.
Very cool. Very good. Well, yeah. And if you can send me all that information, I'll put it all in the description. People can follow you. And if you can follow me at Rachel's Reviews, all of our social media, iTunes, YouTube, and on Rotten Tomatoes. So check that out. Also check out the Hallmarkies podcast. And I'll put a link down for the whole playlist of all the female film critics panels over the years. And if you're listening on iTunes, please leave your ratings and reviews. I'd really, really appreciate that. And if you are watching on YouTube, please give the video a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel. Appreciate that so much. We also have the Patreon group and merch store. And you can check all of that out. Links in the description. And thanks so much. We'll talk to you all later. Bye, everyone.